The Chicago night hums with energy as I step into the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the city's black elite. Athletes, entrepreneurs, politicians, all gathered for the annual Black Excellence Charity Gala. My custom Tom Ford tuxedo fits perfectly, just like everything else in my life. I'm Jamal Carter, the most ruthless sports agent in the Midwest, and tonight is just another stage for me to dominate. I move through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging handshakes and hollow compliments. The air smells like expensive perfume and ambition. My eyes catch Marcus Wilson near the bar, his smug grin already irritating me. We go way back, college roommates turned rivals. Now he runs a successful media empire, while I own the sports world. There's always been tension between us, a competition neither of us ever really quit. Marcus raises his glass as I approach. He doesn't waste time. "I've got a proposition for you," he says, voice dripping with challenge. The bet is simple: marry a woman of his choosing, stay married for 6 months, and I get a 20% stake in his new streaming platform. If I back out, I lose my biggest client to him. I laugh. Marriage is just another contract, and I've never broken one in my life. Women have always been temporary distractions, and this won't be any different. I shake his hand without hesitation. Easy win. A week later, I'm sitting in a downtown cafe, waiting for my so-called bride. Marcus refused to give me details, only a time and place. The door opens, and I see her, Kiara Monroe. She's not what I expected. No designer labels, no pretentious aura. Just a woman in a simple blazer and jeans, her locks pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She teaches at a South Side public school, Marcus said. Community organizer. The kind of person who actually believes in making a difference. She sits across from me, her dark eyes assessing me like I'm a problem to solve. No nervousness, no flattery. Just calm, steady observation. She knows about the bet. And yet, she's here. "I'm not interested in your money or your lifestyle," she says plainly. But I have my reasons for agreeing to this. There's something in her tone, a quiet steel that catches me off guard. Most people bend when they meet me. She doesn't. For the first time in years, I feel the faintest flicker of doubt. This might not be as easy as I thought. The paperwork is signed within the hour. A marriage license, a 6-month timer set in motion. As I watch her walk away, I tell myself this is just business. But something about the way she carries herself, the way she looked at me like she already saw through all my games, it lingers. I pour myself a drink when I get home, staring at the Chicago skyline from my penthouse. This is just another deal. Another win waiting to happen. So why do I feel like I just made the first real gamble of my life? The ink on our marriage certificate is barely dry when I realize this arrangement won't play out like I imagined. I expect Kiara to move into my penthouse, to at least pretend to play the role of a trophy wife, for 6 months. Instead, she continues living in her modest Bronzeville apartment, riding the L train to work every morning like nothing has changed. I send her a diamond necklace from Tiffany's the first week, something tasteful but undeniably expensive. The package comes back unopened with a note. "I don't wear shackles, Jamal." It stings more than it should. At a charity gala for the Bulls organization, I insist she accompany me. She shows up in a simple black dress, nothing like the designer gowns the other women wear, yet somehow she commands the room. When a group of agents' wives try to draw her into their vapid conversation about vacation homes, Kiara politely excuses herself to talk with the waitstaff about fair wages. I watch, equal parts annoyed and fascinated, as she effortlessly dismantles every expectation. I try to assert control. When she spends late nights grading papers instead of attending my events, I arrange for her principal to receive a sudden, anonymous donation, with strings attached, fewer after-school commitments for Kiara. She finds out within days. The look she gives me when she walks into my office could melt steel. "You don't get to interfere with my work," she says quietly before leaving. For the first time in my career, I feel ashamed of pulling strings. One afternoon, out of sheer curiosity, I drive to Douglas Academy, where she teaches. Through the classroom window, I watch her with her students. There's a light in her eyes I've never seen directed at me. These kids, mostly black, many from broken homes, look at her like she's magic. When a security guard tries to escort me out, Kiera spots me and, to my surprise, invites me in. That's how I end up sitting in the back of a high school classroom, watching Kiera teach Langston Hughes to a room full of teenagers who actually care. The moment shatters when the white principal bursts in, berating a student for wearing a Black Lives Matter pin. Without thinking, I stand up. My voice carries the same authority I use when negotiating million-dollar contracts. The principal backs down immediately. Later, in the parking lot, Kiera studies me with new eyes. That was unexpected, she admits. I don't tell her how unexpected it felt for me too. Using my power for someone else's benefit. That night, lying in my empty penthouse, I realized something dangerous. I'm starting to respect her. And in my world, respect is far more dangerous than desire. The mystery of Kiera gnaws at me like a persistent ache. 3 weeks into our arrangement, I find myself staring at the ceiling of my penthouse at 3 a.m., unable to sleep. There's something about the way she carries herself, that quiet fury masked by measured calm, that suggests deeper wounds than just typical activist passion. I call in a favor from an old law school friend who runs a discreet investigation firm. By noon the next day, I have a dossier on my desk. The pages feel heavy in my hands. Her brother, Elijah Monroe, was 22 when Chicago PD gunned him down outside a convenience store in Englewood. Wrong place, wrong time. Mistaken identity during a robbery investigation. The body cam footage showed him complying, hands raised, before 3 bullets tore through his chest. The officers walked. No indictments. No justice. The photos show a younger Kiera at the protests that followed, her face raw with grief but her posture unbroken. Newspaper clippings detail her transformation from grieving sister to relentless advocate, pushing for police reform, creating after-school programs, becoming the teacher she wished Elijah had when the system failed him. Then I find Marcus's connection. My stomach turns when I see the time-stamped emails between him and Kiera from before our marriage. He knew. Of course he knew. This wasn't just a random selection. It was a calculated move. He dangled her in front of me like bait, knowing exactly what kind of grenade he was throwing into my life. I storm into Marcus's office without announcement. The smirk on his face confirms everything before I even speak. "You set this up?" I accuse, slamming the dossier on his desk. Marcus leans back, swirling his bourbon. "You walked right into it, brother. Thought you'd enjoy the challenge." His laughter grates against my skin. "You really think a woman like that could ever look at someone like you without seeing everything you represent?" The drive home is a blur. I find Kiera in her apartment, sitting by the window with a framed photo in her lap, Elijah's graduation picture. She doesn't look up when I enter, just traces the edge of the frame with her thumb. The silence between us stretches, thick with unspoken history. I want to apologize for prying, for Marcus's games, for existing in a world that took her brother and gave her men like me in return. But the words clot in my throat. What apology could possibly cover that? Instead, I sit beside her on the floor. Not touching, not speaking, just present. The photo stares up at us, Elijah's bright eyes frozen in time. Kiera's shoulders tremble once, a barely contained earthquake of emotion. In this moment, I understand something fundamental. Marcus was wrong. This isn't about whether she can forgive someone like me. It's about whether I can forgive myself for never realizing how deep the damage ran. The grandfather clock in her hallway ticks loudly in the quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a police siren wails. Kiera finally lifts her gaze to meet mine, and what I see there isn't hatred. It's something far more dangerous. Understanding. And for the first time in my carefully constructed life, I feel completely exposed. I wake up before dawn with Elijah Monroe's face burned into my eyelids. For 3 nights straight, I've dreamt of that photograph, his hopeful smile, the cap and gown he never got to wear, the life he never got to live. The sheets tangle around me like accusations as I sit up, rubbing my face. My penthouse feels suddenly suffocating, all glass and steel and emptiness. At 5:30 a.m., I find myself drafting an email to Marcus. The words come easier than I expect. I'm out. The bet's off. I'll lose the client, the deal, whatever he wants. It doesn't matter anymore. Kiara opens her apartment door still in her teaching clothes. Grading papers spread across her coffee table. She looks exhausted but unsurprised to see me. I don't wait for an invitation. I know about Elijah, I say, the words rough in my throat. About everything. If you want to end this now, I'll sign whatever papers you need. She sets down her red pen carefully. The silence stretches between us, filled with the hum of her refrigerator and the distant sounds of Chicago waking up. When she finally speaks, it's not the anger I expect. Just one quiet question. Why? I open my mouth to respond with some polished excuse, but nothing comes out. The truth is, I don't know why. Not really. Not in any way that makes sense, even to myself. That afternoon, I drive to the Southside Community Center, where Kiara runs her brother's foundation. The building is modest, but vibrant, murals covering the brick walls, the sound of children laughing drifting through open windows. I sit in my car for 20 minutes before going inside, watching families come and go. At the front desk, I ask for the donation form. The coordinator eyes my tailored suit suspiciously, but hands me a clipboard. I fill it out under a fake name, wiring enough to fund their legal aid program for a year. It's not about buying forgiveness. I'm not that naive. It's about something else I can't name. Kiara finds out within hours, of course. She shows up at my office unannounced, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. She doesn't thank me, doesn't yell at me, just watches me with those knowing eyes until I have to look away. That evening, we end up on my balcony overlooking the city. The sunset paints the skyline in oranges and purples, the same colors as the bruises I used to hide growing up. Kiara sips her tea, waiting. The story comes out in pieces. My childhood in Robert Taylor Homes, the way my father's weakness destroyed our family, how I swore I'd never be powerless again. I tell her about the first time I realized money could be armor, about the people I stepped on to climb higher, about the hollow victories that stopped meaning anything years ago. Kiara listens without interrupting. When I finally run out of words, she reaches over and takes my hand. Just for a second, just long enough to make my breath catch. Now I understand, she says softly. And somehow, that simple acknowledgement cracks something open inside me. For the first time in my life, I feel seen, not for my success or my reputation, but for the damaged, desperate boy I've been running from all these years. The city lights blink on below us, one by one. Neither of us moves to go inside. The storm breaks on a Tuesday morning. I'm halfway through my first coffee when my phone explodes with notifications. Marcus has made his move. TMZ runs the story first. Sports agent's sham marriage exposed. The Daily Mail follows with teacher trapped in millionaire's bed. By noon, every entertainment and gossip site has twisted our story into something ugly. They paint Kiara as either a gold-digging opportunist or a naive victim, never considering she might be neither. I watch the chaos unfold from my office, my stomach twisting as news vans swarm Douglas Academy. Security footage shows Kiara walking through a gauntlet of shouted questions, her posture rigid but her chin high. The clip goes viral, her silence speaking louder than any soundbite they hope to extract. My PR team scrambles to contain the damage. They draft statements, propose damage control strategies, suggest we lay low until the storm passes. I let them talk, nodding at the right places, but my mind is elsewhere. I find Kiara at her apartment, surrounded by lesson plans and untouched takeout. Her phone buzzes constantly on the table, concerned colleagues, nosy reporters, probably Marcus gloating. She mutes it without looking. We can fix this, I say, pacing her small living room. I'll call a press conference. We'll explain everything. Kiara shakes her head, running a finger along the edge of Elijah's photograph on her bookshelf. I'm not hiding, she says simply. The next morning, she goes to work as usual. I watch from my car as she walks straight through the media circus, head held high. The students form a protective circle around her, their angry shouts at the reporters echoing across the schoolyard. Something shifts inside me at that moment. All my life, I've treated truth as a commodity to be managed, reputation as something to manipulate. Kiara just stands in her truth, unflinching, And suddenly every strategy session with my PR team feels hollow. I make my decision. The school auditorium is packed when I arrive, reporters, parents, curious onlookers. Kiara stands at the microphone, calmly addressing questions about our marriage. She doesn't defend herself. She talks about her students, about the work that matters, about how little the gossip changes, what happens in her classroom. Then she sees me walking down the center aisle. The room falls silent. I don't wait for an invitation. Taking the microphone, I face the crowd without my usual polished speech. The words come raw and unscripted. Yes, our marriage started as a bet. A collective gasp ripples through the room. A stupid, arrogant mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. I glance at Kiara, her expression unreadable. But somewhere along the way, it became real. I talk about Elijah, about Marcus's manipulation, about how Kiara made me see the world differently. Then I announced the Elijah Monroe Memorial Fund, not just my money, but my time, my connections, my commitment to continue the work Kiara started. The reporters erupt with questions, but I only have eyes for Kiara. Her face does something complicated: surprise, skepticism, then something softer I can't quite name. As security escorts us out through the chaos, our hands brush. Neither of us pulls away. The headlines tomorrow will spin this a dozen different ways. But for the first time since this began, I don't care what story they tell. The only person whose opinion matters is walking beside me, her shoulder warm against mine in the Chicago cold. The penthouse feels like someone else's life as I sign the final sale documents. The minimalist furniture, the view that once made me feel invincible, none of it fits who I'm becoming. The realtor eyes me curiously when I request properties in Bronzeville instead of the usual Gold Coast listings, but she doesn't ask questions. Money buys discretion, if nothing else. I find a brick two-flat near Kiara's old apartment, close enough to Douglas Academy that we can hear the school bells. It needs work. The hardwood floors are scratched, the kitchen outdated, but the bones are solid. When I show Kiara, she runs her fingers along the built-in bookshelves in the living room and nods. "This could be home," she says, and something warm spreads through my chest. Moving day is nothing like my previous luxury relocations. There are no art handlers in white gloves, just Kiara's teacher friends carrying boxes, while my former assistant looks horrified at the lack of elevator. We order pizza and drink cheap beer on the unfinished porch, listening to the neighborhood sounds, kids playing jump rope, old men arguing about the Cubs, the occasional blues riff drifting from someone's radio. The Elijah Monroe Memorial Fund becomes my new full-time job. At first, the community organizers eye me with suspicion, waiting for the catch. But month after month, I show up, reviewing case files, connecting families with legal resources, using my old networks to open doors that used to only swing for million-dollar contracts. The work is messy and heartbreaking and more fulfilling than anything I've ever done. Kiara still teaches, still comes home with chalk dust on her clothes and stories about her students. Some nights we sit at our kitchen table, her grading papers, while I draft grant proposals, comfortable in our shared silence. Other nights we argue passionately about fundraising strategies or community outreach, the kind of heated debates that used to terrify me, but now feel like another form of intimacy. On the anniversary of our real beginning, not the wedding for the bet, but the day I stood with her at that press conference, our house fills with people. Kiara's colleagues, foundation families, a few of my old contacts who've surprised me by sticking around. The air smells of jerk chicken and peach cobbler, the sounds of Stevie Wonder and children's laughter blending through the open windows. I watch Kiara across the room, her locks piled atop her head, the yellow sundress she wears making her skin glow in the late afternoon light. She's deep in conversation with Elijah's best friend, gesturing animatedly about some new school initiative. There's a lightness to her now that wasn't there when we first met, as if some old wound has finally begun to heal. She catches me looking and excuses herself, weaving through our guests with easy grace. When she reaches me, she doesn't say anything, just slips her hand into mine and leans her head against my shoulder. Her palm is warm and slightly rough from all the papers she grades, a texture I've come to love. The future stretches before us, uncertain, challenging, beautiful in its imperfection. There will be more fights and setbacks, days when the weight of what we're trying to do feels unbearable. But for the first time in my life, I'm not facing it alone. Kiera squeezes my hand, and I know without words that she's thinking the same thing. We stand there together, watching our unlikely family fill the home we've built, and I understand this is what winning truly feels like. The morning light filters through the sheer curtains of our bedroom, painting golden stripes across the rumpled sheets. I watch Kiera sleep, her breathing steady and calm, the tension that used to crease her forehead now smoothed away. Outside, the sounds of our neighborhood coming to life replaced the sterile silence of my old penthouse, a garbage truck rumbling down the alley, Mrs. Johnson next door calling to her grandchildren, the distant whistle of the L train. I pad barefoot to the kitchen, starting coffee the way Kiera likes it, strong with just a hint of cinnamon. The fridge is covered in drawings from her students, invitations to community meetings, a photo of us at last month's fundraiser, where we raised enough to send 30 kids to college. My old life feels like someone else's story now, a cautionary tale about empty victories. Kiera appears in the doorway, wrapped in my old Howard University sweatshirt, her locks piled into a messy bun. She presses a kiss to my shoulder before reaching for her mug. This simple domestic ritual more intimate than anything I ever experienced in my previous life of calculated encounters. Today is the groundbreaking for the new Elijah Monroe Community Center. As we dress, me in a simple suit, without the usual designer labels, Kiera in one of her brightly colored dresses that make her look like sunrise personified, I think about how far we've come. The reporters who once hounded us for scandal now request interviews about our work. Marcus sends occasional emails I delete unread. The bet that started it all feels like ancient history. The construction site buzzes with energy when we arrive. Former students Kiera mentored now wearing hard hats and proud smiles, community elders blessing the ground, Elijah's face smiling down from the architectural renderings. I stand back as Kiera moves through the crowd, her laughter ringing out as she hugs former students and introduces me to people whose lives she's touched. When the speeches begin, I expect her to take the microphone. Instead, she nudges me forward. My hands tremble slightly as I look out at the crowd, not out of nervousness, but from the weight of this moment. I speak about redemption, about second chances, about how a community lifted me up when I didn't deserve it. But mostly I talk about Elijah, and how his legacy will live on in every child who walks through these doors. Afterwards, as we shovel ceremonial dirt and pose for pictures, Kiera's hand finds mine. Her fingers are warm and sure, her engagement ring glinting in the sunlight, a simple band with a single emerald, chosen together after months of careful saving on my teacher's salary and nonprofit director's pay. Later, when the crowds have dispersed and we're left alone in what will soon be the center's library, Kiera turns to me with tears in her eyes, but a smile on her lips. In this moment, I understand that our happy ending isn't an ending at all. It's a daily choice, a constant becoming, a path we walk together. The afternoon sun slants through the unfinished walls, painting our shadows large against the raw concrete. Side by side, they stretch forward into the empty space, where shelves will one day hold books, where children will learn and dream, where Elijah's memory will live on. Our fingers stay intertwined as we walk toward that future. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. And for the first time in my life, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.